Our next guest, pleased to be joined by a Cuse grad himself, does play-by-play for ESPN, ACC Network. Every time I turn on the TV, I see and hear Jay Alter calling the game. He was very busy this past weekend. Women's lacrosse, men's basketball here in town. Jay, it's great to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. It's always a pleasure to be on the Stephen Fonte show. And I had some fun looking at my social media mentions after trying to give you guys credit for what was a great interview with John Wildhack.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will say this. It's become kind of a running joke in the office this past week because there was, shall I say, another television station in town that didn't even try to give us proper attribution for the quote and for the interview. So the fact that you tried on the fly, I tried to explain to Paulie what happened, we do very much appreciate that.
Yeah, so let me explain to Paulie what happened. And what makes great irony is if you know where the TV broadcast sits, I'm looking at Paulie as I'm right across the court, who's over with the home local call with Matt Park. So I'm looking at our graphic and I'm like, oh man, I know that came from your show because I watched your show to prep for the game and I wanted to hear what John Wildhack had to say. So I'm like, I got to give some attribution for it. So I'm thinking, okay, I've been on the show plenty of times. I'm trying to remember Orange Nation. I should have known, but I just go, oh, it's a Stephen Fonte show here in Syracuse. So that's the story. You know, when you're doing live radio or live TV, stuff comes out of your mouth. So thanks for being good sports about it.
Well, I loved it for one. So, no, I loved it, Jay, and no, I appreciate you trying to on the spot come up with something, and we do appreciate it. But it was a great broadcast that you did as usual, and let's talk about the game. And this team has obviously had its fair share of disappointment this year and a lot of adversity. What do you make of the way that they're playing right now? And as they go into the ACC tournament with some momentum, I know it's not going to matter, big picture, but the team you saw on the floor on Saturday, what did you make of what you saw?
So when you get ready to do a game, you watch a handful of games before, and I felt like Syracuse had been playing better than their record. I can't lie to you and say I've watched every Syracuse game this year, but I would say from the Carolina game on, Carolina, Pitt, NC State, SMU, Virginia Tech, I'm watching those games and I go, yeah, I mean, it's not a top 25 team, but they're way better than below 500 and down in the ACC. So I think they're improving. I think they haven't quit. I mean, you certainly couldn't accuse that team of quitting. So let's see what team shows up in the Dome. And I thought that was their best game, even better than all those games. And they put it together and they closed out. So again, I know that's not going to make this season any better for Syracuse fans, but I do think there's something to be said when you take a look at the players and the coaching staffs that they've improved as the season's gone on. They haven't thrown in the towel. And would it shock anybody if they play like they did on Saturday night against Virginia, if they go down to the ACC tournament and win 2 games?
Probably. I think it would surprise some people. But I hear what you're saying.
My question is,
go ahead.
Am I crazy to think as I was watching the SMU game and even the UNC game, going back to that, Virginia Tech where they lose in overtime, like it didn't look like a bad team. It didn't look like a team with the record of 12-18.
Right. And listen, I'm with you. And I laid that out at the beginning of the show that I was saying, listen, they don't have to play Duke and everybody's kind of the same in this conference, 5 through 15 or 6 through 15. And so, no, I don't think it would shock me or Paulie. I think a lot of the people who listen to this show, based on the comments we get, it would shock them if they won a couple of games in a row. Because that's been the biggest issue is their consistency that, in spots, they'll look like, okay, they're turning the corner and then, ultimately they can't close out games where they have double-digit leads, but they did do that on Saturday. This thing's all going to be over in the next couple of days for Syracuse. It might be tomorrow, might be the day after. As you look ahead to the offseason, Jay, what do you think is SU's biggest need as they go into the offseason in the portal, as they try to round out their roster for next year?
Yeah, for me, it's a point guard. I think J.J. Starling would be better with kind of playing off the ball more, with the ball not needing to be in his hands all the time. When he was at Notre Dame, I thought he was a really good slasher. You can't really do that when you're kind of the only ball handler, or the most reliable ball handler. So I think they need to prioritize a point guard. I think they need to go into the portal, not be afraid to spend money because it's such a valuable position, and really make a splash. I think when you look at the freshman class they're bringing in, having a reliable veteran point guard, and I'll give you an example. Look at what Louisville did with Chucky Hepburn. I don't know if there's going to be a Chucky Hepburn type player in the portal, but if there is, throw every dollar you have at him, because look at what an elite veteran point guard has done at Louisville. So for me, it would be that type of player. I think you obviously have to add a big as well, but for me, it all starts and ends with, can they bring in a legitimate veteran tested point guard that, even SMU, like bringing in a Boopy Miller from Wake Forest, I think was part of the reason they had so much success.
I asked Jim Boeheim this question. I'll ask it to you. With the ACC tournament coming up here, you taking Duke or the field?
I will take the field, and I do think Duke can win the national championship, but I don't know if they'll win the ACC championship, and that's because I think Louisville and Clemson are that good. I think I've had both of them a lot this season, and I think Clemson, to me, is most equipped for tournament play. Of a veteran team that's been there before. Chase Hunter is so good. Ian Shefflin's a beast. Like, I think Clemson's got all the pieces, and I don't think it was a fluke that they beat Duke in the regular season. So if that's the matchup again, I'll take the field, and I guess I'll take the field because I think I got Clemson or Louisville. Either one, I think, would have a point to prove after losing the regular season by a single game.
Yeah, Clemson is one of the exceptions to the rule right now. All these teams going into the portal, and Clemson, you've got their key players for the most part have all been guys that have come up through the system there, which is something that you don't see all that often. Let's move on to lacrosse while we got you. And, the SU men picking up a huge win yesterday over Hopkins. What do you make of this team? They came in as preseason number 2. They lost a couple of games early, but it's still early. It's still early March. What do you make of the Orange and Gary Gates squad?
I do think the preseason ranking hurt them, Steve. I think they kind of believed, okay, we are the number 2 team in the country a little bit. And so when they had that adversity, it was unexpected. That was a big win. Not because if they lost, the season would be over, but they needed to prove that they could win a marquee game, which they had yet to do. They had won the games they were supposed to win, and in the 2 games, Maryland and Harvard, that were against top 20 teams, they lost. So they needed to prove that they could put it together against big competition. That said, they're going to need to repeat that performance a bunch of times because it's a gauntlet of the season that they still have remaining. Virginia's not having their best season, but they're still a tough out. You've got the entire ACC left, Duke, Notre Dame, Carolina, all playing very well. You got Cornell, which is a top 5 team. So this is a team that's going to be tested. It's can they improve upon that Hopkins performance? Yes, they did enough to get it done, but I would say it was a gritty performance, particularly offensively. At times, they really struggled to score, and then they strung it together in the end of the third quarter there. But I think they're a team that's going to need to continue to improve throughout the season, but it was a very valuable win because if you lost that one, you put yourself in a very difficult spot.
Going back to hoops for a second, we talk about how big of a year next year is for Adrian Autry. When you look at this men's lacrosse team and the expectations they had coming in and the fact that they have this lengthy drought of not making it to the Final Four, and, Joey Spallina's class is now juniors, they're healthy. It seems like they got the talent. I guess my question is, how big of a year is this for Gary Gate and for the program?
I think Gary would tell you he knows that he's got to get to a Final Four, that he brought in this class, and the reason he took the job was to get Syracuse back to the Final Four and championship weekend and competing for national championships. So nobody would be more disappointed than Gary if they don't end playing for a championship on Memorial Day. And I do feel like this team can still get there. I just don't think they were number 2 preseason. I would probably put them at 5 or 6. And that said, it's going to be the team that improves from now until May that ends up winning it. And I still think that can be Syracuse, but there needs to be significant strides even after that win against Hopkins.
I want to touch on the women's team. You mentioned, 5 or 6 might have been, more along the lines of where Gary Gates' squad should have been ranked. That is right where Kayla Trainer's squad was ranked to start the season, right about that top 5. And we see with the women's game, there is not as much parity as the men's game. And there's, whereas the men's game, you could probably point to, 12 to 15 teams that legitimately could make a Final Four. With the women's game, it's not quite the same. My question there is, would you put Syracuse, the SU women, in that tier of teams that are truly national title contenders, or do you think they are just kind of one notch below the true elite teams in the country right now?
If I'm being completely honest with you, Steve, I do feel like 2 teams have kind of separated on the women's side this season, and it's Boston College and North Carolina. Now, that is subject to change as teams improve, but as we sit here today on March 10th, it is North Carolina and Boston College kind of alone in that tier. And I've had Northwestern this season. Usually they're in that tier. They're sitting at number 3 in the polls, but I do think this season I would put Syracuse in the tier with Northwestern and Maryland and Yale, kind of as tier 2. But tier 1, I would say, is North Carolina and Boston College. I would be shocked if that is not the national championship this season.
One last one on the SU women. No Olivia Adamson. Why the mystery around her, her sitting out, I guess, or not being available for this team? And I guess how much does her absence affect what Kayla Trainer's trying to do this year?
Well, it's a huge absence. Let's start there. I mean, she's the best player on the team if healthy. So I think that is, if Olivia Adamson, going back to your previous question, if Olivia Adamson was healthy and playing, I might put Syracuse in that tier with Boston College and North Carolina. But without her, I think, again, they drop a tier below. In terms of the mystery, it's interesting because I had the game right after North Carolina that she missed when they played Northwestern. And I asked, like you would, Steve, like you would for any player, what's the deal? And we were given no answer, which is interesting just because if it were just a regular injury, wouldn't you just say she's injured? Which I do believe there is an injury. I'm not going to incriminate myself or speculate. That's not fair to the program, and that's not fair to the player. But it does seem interesting that obviously now since I've done that game, they came out with a statement saying she's out for the season. But before that statement came out, we were left in the dark for that Northwestern game, which you never want to have that cloud of mystery. I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's certainly a huge loss, as you pointed out. Best player on the team and no longer available for the rest of the season. We are out of time, Jay. Where are you heading next? Like I said, you have a very aggressive schedule. I feel like you're calling games all the time. What's your next assignment?
I'm glad you brought this up. So I just finished lunch with Rick Beardsley at Utica Pizza Company. He said to get that in there. So I'm glad I got that in there for Rick. And then I'm headed back to the Dome because the Cuse women are playing Hopkins at 4 o'clock on ESPNU. So I'm still in Syracuse.
Nice.
And then after that, I've got the MAC tournament for Champ Week on the men's side. That's the MAC with 2 A's down in Atlantic City. Back on the hoops.
The Jerry McNamara. The Jerry McNamara MAC. The Mac.
Yeah, yes. How about this, Jerry? Jerry could make another run. He's in that 8-9 game, and they'd have to upset Quinnipiac, the 1 seed. But you never know what can happen.
All right, and for those wondering, anytime we have a former Cuse student on, I always say, it's a part of my coaching tree. You are a part of the Infani coaching tree, but you are not a part of mine. You are a part of my wife's coaching tree. So
that is true.
You were in her class way back when. She said to make sure that I say hello to you. So hello from Kim.
Wait, Kim is the best, and yes, I had her my freshman year, huge influence on me, and I feel bad. Usually when I get to Syracuse, I try and see her, but I had to settle for coming on the Steve Infanti show instead.
Hold on, Steve. First of all, Jay, I'm the jerk who sent the tweet. All fun. We appreciate you. Second of all, when Rick Beardsley Eden gets mentioned on the show, we need to know exactly what he ordered for lunch. We give away tickets by playing What Did Rick Beardsley Have for Lunch, so we need to know.
Okay, 2 orders of fried meatballs and then a sausage and pepper. So he went pretty heavy. He went aggressive.
That sounds very Rick Beardsley-like. All right, Jay, great to have you on. We love chatting with you. Be well, and I'm sure we'll continued success. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Paulie, and I appreciate you being a good sport about the other night. So thanks, guys.